Welcome to the Hills Property Panel. Today we're discussing exactly what is affecting the Hills district and the market, covering national and local influences with guests Dr. Andrew Wilson and Stu Benson. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Good to be back.
Welcome. Stu, let's start with your expertise, working with the local homeowners every day of the week and the local agents. What's happening directly in the market and what's happening with the property interest and the demand now?
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting. The set of data that we've just pulled from September has shown that we've got registered bidders per auction increased every week throughout the month. We had bids on properties per auction increasing, and the clearance rate has been increasing as well. So to look at September as a most recent snapshot, and at the moment, recency is the best currency that we have. We don't want to look back too far because of the way that the market's been performing. September saw all of our metrics rise. So it's a good sign for anybody who's looking to sell here in the Hills District, and I'm sure Andrew's data probably underpins that as well.
Well, the other question that comes to mind, Stu, is spring is typically when we have a peak of properties on the market.
Yep.
Is that the fact this year?
Look, it seems to be in terms of forward bookings. As an auctioneer, I'm always booked 5 and 6 and 7 weeks in advance to align with marketing campaigns, and there does seem to be a little bit more coming on. And what is coming onto the market, a higher proportion is going to auction to try and stimulate competition. I would still say historically we're light on, but the signs are that more property is about to hit the market, which is good news for buyers.
Bit more selection?
Bit more selection. And again, if you are thinking of selling, I wouldn't wait too long either. I think that you want to be attractive to the buyers in the marketplace because they've got few to choose from, and you want to be one of those few to create competition for your property.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Dr. Andrew, what is currently happening in the Sydney market? What are the focus points and facts, please?
Well, look, absolutely validating what we've heard. In terms of the local market, is that we've certainly seen the beginning of the spring selling season in Sydney pick up. Where I guess we had doubts as to how spring was going to turn out. There's a lot of doom and gloom and negativity in the market, but the Sydney market's really shrugged a lot of that off. And if we look back to a similar period, 2018, when we had a lot of we had lower confidence. A lot of sort of crazy predictions of where the market was going to go. Our clearance rates now, auction clearance rates Sydney-wide, are significantly higher, tracking in the low mid-60s than where they were then. I think really the secret to property markets, the Sydney property market particularly, is we have such a strong economy. I think people are, everybody's got a job who wants a job. There's plenty of competition for available workers out there. Wages are rising. We've got lots of stories about, moving from job to job and getting massive pay rises. And I think the point to, the fact that people, yes, are concerned about higher interest rates is that they're getting on with business because they feel so good about their personal circumstances. And I think that eventually, they shrug off that sort of doom and gloom. And I mean, what's the point of having a great job, having a rising income, if you're not sort of focusing on the big picture, which is your next property? Yeah, right. And I think eventually people move into that and they just sort of think, well, this is all, not real to my circumstances. Yeah. So why shouldn't I take advantage of a great economy? Yeah. And I think generally that's what we're going to see over the spring selling season. And I think that the point that higher clearance rates are also being validated by other measures such as, yes, prices are still easing in Sydney, but they're not easing at the same rate as they did through winter. Yep. Days on market is falling. And I guess there's a combination of factors that now, other than just speculating that the market may be reaching for the bottom, we can actually see signs that it's turning now. And I think that's, again, just really underscores how strong the Sydney market is through the longer term.
If we look at the facts and if we want to get a snapshot, some realistic points of view, then we're looking at interest rates are rising, state the obvious, coming to the 0.25s. It looks like that's possibly going to be a norm of 0.25.
Yeah, look, I think we've obviously had the latest Reserve Bank decision. I think it was a shock to many because we felt, okay, it'll be another 0.5% increase. There's really been no new data coming out since over the last couple of months. We're waiting for the September quarter data, particularly for inflation. Similar economies, the UK and the US are not looking really red hot there. They're pushing their rates up higher than Australia. Their inflation is higher. There was a sense that perhaps we would just follow along in the shorter term until we got more positive data coming out, or at least more data coming out. But the Reserve Bank was certainly surprised at with that 0.25% increase. I think that it'll be problematic for them to move back up to 0.5% from where they are. So again, we just might be seeing signs that we may be reaching for the peak of the interest rate cycle a little lower and a little earlier than we thought. And I think this will again generate a lot of confidence, or more confidence, or certainly stabilise confidence in our housing markets.
Well, over the past 4 years, to look at that timeline,
yes,
the market came up. What percentage?
Well, look, obviously we've had a correction period this year. It's interesting that the correction in the Sydney market occurred before we had higher interest rates in May, and that was because the prices had risen so strongly, remarkably strongly last year, that it started to create those affordability barriers where you're just pushing buyers out of the market because they can't just go to the bank and say, I need another 100 grand, I need another 200 grand. So, well, sorry, you're not earning enough. And all that pent-up demand through lockdown was satisfied. So it was just a general, I guess, settling of the market after a very strong period. But of course, along came higher interest rates. It affected confidence in the shorter term and affordability. But I think that, there's the other factor that maybe is reinforcing a more stable mindset in Sydney buyers and sellers is the fact that their prices are still 32, even if we get a correction of around 10% in the market this year, over the past 4 years, Sydney's house prices are still higher by over 32%. So that's an average with a correction of 8% per year. So it's not just, I've got a job and it's a strong economy, but gee whiz, look at my balance sheet. Look how much my property's worth. And I've been paying very low interest rates, and a lot of Australians have actually paid down a larger proportion of their mortgage during the COVID period. They've saved. So, I think we're the lucky country again, and that Sydney housing market's maybe the lucky housing market, but it did lead the charge down. I think it's leading the charge back upwards again.
Yeah. But Stu, is it right to say that the rising interest rates are having a direct impact on the property prices in the Hills District?
Look, I would say that the rising interest rates are probably having an effect on confidence more than anything. Confidence is a huge X factor in the business of real estate.
Absolutely.
And I would say that it's probably had a few buyers worried about their repayments, but as Andrew said, a lot of people are in work, a lot of people have gone to a better job, and so whilst the rates are going up and people's borrowing is having to increase, serviceability on those mortgages is still pretty achievable for most people. A lot of people have just been waiting to see where the dust has settled in terms of the market. Everybody wants to buy at the bottom, and the only time you know you're at the bottom was when it starts going back up and you go, well,
That's right.
there it was,
We're at the bottom.
and I missed it. And nobody wants to miss it. So I think that's got a little bit to do with people coming back and the September data rising in terms of bidder numbers and clearance rates. I think people are sensing that we might be at that settling of the dust. And for that reason, we're seeing competition. So look, it's absolutely on people's minds that, these rates are getting a little bit tough to navigate, but for the overwhelming majority of people who have got good jobs, who have increased their salary and their serviceability is still okay, historically, it's still a good time to buy. And anybody who's doing their research knows that bricks and mortar in Sydney over the long term, not a bad bet.
Yes, that's a good point. So over the long term, so it's about the time you've been in the market rather than the timing.
Oh, look, well, they say, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. And, the stats that Andrew just said over a 4-year period alone, despite the drop, despite the correction,
COVID,
we're all doing all right.
That's right. And look, there's in waiting in the wings, we have plane loads of migrants that are, heading again to their favourite destination, Sydney and Melbourne. And we've basically run out of houses already. Look at rents going through the roof. We just don't have enough houses already for Sydney-siders, and yet we've got potentially 100,000 coming into Sydney over the next 12 to 18 months. Where are they going to live?
Visa applications.
Yeah, look, if I was a bidder and I was looking to buy at auction at the moment, I'd be wanting to compete now. the numbers are increasing, as I've mentioned, and once immigration picks back up again, expats coming back, repatriation, all of those sorts of things, you are going to find yourselves in much greater competition. I think now's a really, genuinely, you can trust me, I'm a real estate agent, I think now's a great time to buy.
And I think also, when we think about the potential for maybe a 10% fall this year in Sydney, that means that we're 10% away from where we could have been or would have been,
Yes.
which we can then pick up without having any material change in the drivers.
Yep.
So we've lost that 10, but we know we can recover that 10 with the basis of what we have with interest rates and income. So, that means that with increased demand, confidence restored, interest rates settling, next year could actually be quite a positive year.
Yep.
Speaking of the population growth, we've got some data coming out of the census reports now. So from 2016 to 2021, the population in 2016 for the Hills District was at 160,000 and there were 51,000 dwellings. And in 2021, the population is over 190,000. We've got 64,000 dwellings. And we know around this area there's majority couples with children, about 60% couples with children in the household makeup. So it's simple to understand that we've had an increase of 30,000 people over the past 5 years into the Hills District. We run from Borkham Hills right down to the Hawkesbury. It's a pretty big area of land mass. Not all of it is divided up. Some of it's into acreage as well, large acreage. So the part to seriously consider is the future over the next 15 years. It is to forecast that by 2036, the population will be around 250,000. That's an increase of about 34%, an increase of 64,000 people. So the showground precinct where our project is, just to give it a bit more singular as a point of view, that was rezoned in 2017 for 5,000 dwellings, and we're up to 4,500 dwellings. So that's it. Once it gets to the 5,000, they're done for around there. Then they've got to put in more infrastructure, schools and all sorts of things. So the point is that where are the people seriously going to be living around this area? If we keep on that trajectory of the 60,000 people over the next 50 years, and I've just talked about one release that we're almost, it's already been approved. So what do you think is the best advice for the people that are considering over the next 12 months, whether it's moving into the area or the downsizes around this area?
We can see trends happening at the moment throughout. When it talks to the demographic, there is a strong balance of an ageing population here in the Hills District, but then a lot of the children who have grown up here still want to stay here because they're Hills District born and bred. It's what they know, it's what they love. They prefer the infrastructure, and so there's a bit of an even kilter on the scales of an ageing population, but the younger demographic staying home. So what we are seeing is a lot of those buyers on both ends of that scale, the downsizers wanting maintenance-free living, close to amenities, school shops and transport, railway lines. And so when it comes to projects like Château, we've got a buyer group, but then we've also got younger buyers who perhaps don't want to be mowing lawns and don't want to be worrying about maintenance and things like that, also looking at, and we're not only seeing that in the Hills, we're seeing a lot of different shires and a lot of different council areas going up instead of out. And then, as you mentioned, the Hills District is large and it goes all the way to the Hawkesbury, but there's no infrastructure out there, bus routes and train routes and things like that. So I think for the main part of those two opposite ends of the scale, developments like Château and that are on rail lines and things like that, they're going to become increasingly popular and necessary.
Well, less wait times in the car travelling down the major roads, or if you can use some infrastructure, rail or some transport solutions. What are your thoughts on that data that's come out?
That data's obviously interesting for the local area, but this really reflects what's an Australia-wide problem, and that's we just don't build enough houses.
It's hard to have that
and we haven't for a decade.
Andrew, even though I've been in the industry for some time, so has Stu, but it's hard to have the forethought. Stu and I should speak for myself, I don't have 10 houses to get ahead of all this and fill up more.
No, I've got 11.
But do you know what I mean? We're right in the thick of it sometimes, So we're due for all of this influx, and you've mentioned immigration as well, due to open up. So,
well, this is the point. We're still, undersupplied now without the inflation, without the migration surge, and yet we have all these roadblocks to new development, and it's sort of given us the environment. Again, all capital cities are suffering from rents going through the roof. And I think that's the clearest indication in the shorter term that we've basically run out of housing. And governments, manipulate demand in various mechanisms, not understanding that, hey, stupid, it's supply. That's the problem here. We're just not building enough houses of the sort of houses and in the areas where people want to live.
Yep.
And until we can address that, and that's going to be a big if we can address that, but until we can address that, we're going to see higher rents and higher house prices, and that's the point. In these circumstances, you'd be nuts if you weren't a property owner.
Yeah.
It's just becoming such a significantly rare commodity to be able to own a property, Australia-wide basically, and because that underlying imbalance between supply and demand, and nothing will fix that in the shorter term, maybe even the longer term.
Well, what comes to mind then, in the just rounding about, so we're talking about building and construction, but it was hard to get materials,
That's right.
labour and whatnot.
That's
But
right.
where are we up to right now then, just to round this out?
Well, certainly we still have the usual problems with new development, and that's the green tape, the red tape, local zoning interruptions and interferences. But now we've been confronted with the building boom generated by a home builder last year, created massive shortages of materials and labour. We've seen building costs increase by 25% over a year.
Is that levelling out now?
It's starting to level out, but
Right.
it's not growing as strongly as it was,
Yeah.
but it's still growing strongly.
Okay.
And this is the point. Until we absorb all that housing that was generated through a home builder, it will continue to have shortages. So, building costs will remain at a level. They're not going to fall. It's just that the rate of growth won't continue. So that's another impediment to development, because we're already seeing that it's constraining some builders, and prices are rising because of building costs rising, not just a shortage of actual, capacity to match supply with demand. And it's just that, it's sort of Murphy's Law, it happens all at the wrong time.
Yeah.
That we've got a problem matching supply and demand, but now we've got issues with actual building costs for new construction, for new properties.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for coming in today, Dr.
That's my
Andrew.
pleasure, yes. And we've had some good news today, which I think's a really positive step, and I think we'll be continuing to bring some better news going forward.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Stu.
Absolute pleasure. We'll see everybody again in the next recap.